Hi, everybody. I'm Brent Stafford, and welcome to a RegWatch special coverage of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance's Good Cop 2.0, the tobacco harm reduction counter-conference to the World Health Organization's COP11. Good Cop 2.0 unites 37 experts from 22 countries to separate fact from fiction and confront the misinformation shaping global health policy. Joining us live from Geneva at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance's Good Cop 2.0 are David Williams, president at TPA, and Martin Cullop, TPA International Fellow. Gentlemen, it's great to see you both.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here, Brent.
So how's it going in the belly of the beast?
Well, here we are, day one of Good Cop 2.0. And let me tell you, movies have sequels, right? And the sequels are never as good as the original movie. But I got to tell you, I think this sequel, Good Cop 2.0, is going to be better than the original. We have more people, more experts, more countries. We have some bigger stars here. So I think this sequel is going to be a blockbuster for us, maybe not for the World Health Organization, because we are bringing the facts. We are bringing science. We are bringing policy. We are bringing everything to the table. And like you said, Brent, we are in the belly of the beast. And this is very important. It's important for what's happened in Geneva, but really around the world, and for people that are desperately trying to quit smoking. And this is an important year because it's the 20th anniversary of the FCTC, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And it's critical that we talk about these issues. 20 years later, the World Health Organization they've lost their way. And there needs to be a discussion and a continued discussion about what's happening with tobacco control and how people can quit smoking. Listen, that's why we're here, is we're trying to find off-ramps for people that are addicted to smoking. And there are some real off-ramps. There's new products that are coming out, almost daily now to help people, whether it's pouches, snus, heat not burn, e-cigarettes, vaping. It's amazing the number of products that have come out in the last 15 or 20 years. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to these experts. And you mentioned Taxpayers Protection Alliance. This isn't about my organization. This is about the people that are here at the meeting. As you mentioned, 22 countries. I think we're up to 23 countries at this point. But again, this is not about me. This is conference of the people. And if any World Health Organization people, if they're watching, I want them to know that they can come here, that we will talk to them. We will discuss these issues with them. I know that we're not welcome there. Listen, the World Health Organization is about a mile away from this hotel. And I guarantee you, if we went up there, we would not be welcome in their doors. But they are welcome here because, again, this is the conference of the people.
So, well, that's fantastic. And I'm very excited for this week. Martin, maybe you could take a moment and explain to our viewers what the WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control is and why it's important.
Well, it's an international treaty, Brent, and it's designed basically, or it was originally designed to reduce the harms from people smoking, cigarette smoke and tobacco use. But unfortunately, over the 20 years, it's kind of morphed into this more authoritarian anti-industry group that meets up and has veered away from its original course quite a lot. It's interesting, the global GATC, Tobacco Control, Global Alliance of Tobacco Control, that I got there in the end. They did a myth-busting exercise recently, and they published saying that people are saying the FCTC is no longer fit for purpose. And they said, this is a myth, that's not true. But one of the people who actually wrote that was the guy who wrote the treaty himself, Professor Beaglehole. He wrote it in the Lancet. So it's not us that's saying that. It's not industry saying that. It's people who actually wrote the treaty are saying that. So they really have gone off course. And I really think that we're going to have a real conversation here at our Good Cop conference. I think this is where we're going to be discussing things. What's happening down the road is almost irrelevant now because they just won't listen to sense. They won't listen to reason. They won't listen to science, and they won't listen to the evidence.
However, though, they do have quite a bit of power, even though the delegates aren't bound by what the FCTC pushes. But we take a look at the forward-looking statements that have been made, and it seems that they might be, for the lack of a better word, bullying delegates into doing what they want.
Yeah, that's kind of effectively what they're trying to do. Yeah, they're gaslighting the delegates. But it is important that that the parties are the deciders of this conference of the parties. So the people who make the decisions are the parties or the national delegations. So we've just got hope that they have had a good look at the evidence, they have had a look at science, and they know what's going on, and they should recognise that they're being gaslighted and fed stuff that isn't true a lot of the time from the FCTC Secretariat. And we know at COP10 there was quite a lot of pushback. There was 30 or 40 countries that said, hold on, we think you've got the wrong approach here. So we're hoping that the delegations will see through the mist and make some decent decisions at this conference for the good of public health, really.
So let's dive into some clips that we have prepared. Two of them. The first two. This first one is from the Director of Health Promotion for the WHO at COP10, which, after some finagling with scheduling and stuff, was just in February of 2024. So not that long ago, and they certainly made clear what they're planning on doing when it comes to nicotine. Let's have a listen.
The overarching theme for the FCTC COP10, Together Promoting Healthier Lives, is an extremely important narrative that is not only a priority for WHO General Program of Work for the next couple of years, it also serves as a good basis for mainstreaming WHO FCTC into various health and development paradigms. While significant progress has been made in recent years, there is no room for complacency as this program is uneven. The moment a government believes it has won the battle against tobacco, the industry seizes the opportunity to manipulate health policies and promote their deadly products. E-cigarettes are the exception to these positive trends. Here, we are increasingly seeing data showing a rapid increase in uptake by children and young people. For this reason, WHO issued a call to action in December 2023, which urges strong, decisive action to prevent the uptake of e-cigarettes based on the growing body of evidence of its use by children and adolescents. We continue to need a health promotion approach to tobacco control. Countering tobacco industry tactics necessitates the successful promotion of health and well-being through complementary and essential approaches, such as health in all policies, whole of government approaches, and whole of society approaches.
And that, gentleman, is the hook there. WHO is calling that the issue of safer nicotine products is so dire that countries all around the world need to apply a whole of government approach in order to fix it. What's going on there?
Well, it's frustrating to hear what they said in Panama and listen the last number of years at the cops, right? Because they are ignoring science. They are ignoring reality. He talks about, kids using these products, all-time low, at least in the United States. And I think, a lot of other places, all-time low of children using these products. And you have to recognize that. The Centers for Disease Control has numbers that just show that. We're talking about science. We're talking about real numbers. And they can say whatever they want. What we see is that the World Health Organization is struggling right now because more countries spoke up in Panama. You had St. Kitts and Nevis, who really took a lead in speaking up. And I got to tell you, there's a reason why this meeting is in Geneva this year, is because no other country really wanted to host this meeting. And this was their fallback. This is their headquarters. This is their fallback. And I think that says a lot about their mission and where they're going. And obviously, there's a lot to unpack with what they're saying about nicotine. But again, I think if you look at what happened in Panama, there are growing voices from these delegates. And I'm really hoping that we hear more of these delegates talk about the reality of the science, the reality of, giving people options to quit smoking, because for them, the World Health Organization, it's a one-size-fits-all. either you quit or you die. No, there's a lot of in between here as to what people can do with these products.
Definitely. We have a short clip of St. Kitts and Nevis when they were speaking. The last COP10, hard to explain. I'm not too certain what happened there, but it seems that they were almost shut down by the WHO chairperson. So let's have a listen.
And so although the convention that guides us itself describes tobacco control as a range of supply, demand, and harm reduction strategies, the public health community must define these terms in a more detailed manner. It is important to note, however, that the proven concept of harm reduction plays a significant role in other areas of public health, such as sexually transmitted infections, HIV/AIDS, drug and alcohol addiction, and in fact, air pollution. The tobacco control community should not reject the idea of harm reduction per se, but we should learn from the best practices of proven public health-oriented measures while preventing the tobacco industry from hijacking that important term. Having above in mind, we would like to present a proposal to establish, in line of the Article 5.3 of the
St. Kitts and
Convention.
Nevis, please confine yourself to the agenda at
Right.
hand.
And we
This
are
is not the-
proposing a working group, which I intend
It
to
is not
spend
the
more
time
time.
for a proposal. Please give us an update on your on progress in
Right.
St. Kitts.
And the
Relating
update
to
is that
implementation.
I shall deliver a proposal which will assist us in moving forward.
Not
Thank you.
now, St. Kitts.
Not now,
thank
not
you.
now at all,
Yes.
not now.
Thank you.
Not now. Not now. Martin,
Yeah, that's,
what happened there?
That's Denzel Douglas from St. Kitts and Nevis. He's I think he's a former prime minister and a very prominent guy. And there he was saying that maybe the WHO should be thinking about harm reduction. I mean, technically they were right. It's not the place to present a draft decision, but I think he was just saying that that's kind of their approach and they want it recognised by the WHO. But they were brave, as David said, and there were other countries that followed them in the statements. They mentioned harm reduction in the statements. Many countries, I think there's some in the Caribbean, Philippines, I think did, and maybe New Zealand too. And we're hoping more people will use those statements to make a statement, if you like, that they favour harm reduction and that it can help public health in its own way. I'll just say you showed that clip of Rudiger Kretsch. I kind of agree with him in one respect, because he said there we were reducing tobacco use. But the problem we have is that when we had this same thing happen in the UK, the Tobacco and Vapes Bill came in, which promises to set the UK back on harm reduction quite a long way. Me and some advocates had a meeting about how we were going to respond to this. And the first person, as we all met up, said, there we were just about to see the end of smoking and they go and do this. So the only people who are stopping this progress from happening at the moment are the WHO. So Rudiger Kretsch should be saying, we were getting rid of tobacco, and now the WHO is stopping it happening.
Isn't that strange? And that brings us right to now, because it just seems that the WHO has become nicotine control. It's no longer about tobacco at all. And you mentioned earlier when we were discussing this that they don't seem to be mentioning tobacco much in the entire program, do they?
No, they're not. And I think what's happening is that we've seen the private sector, the free market, really develop these products that are taking the harm away from smoking. I mean, and listen, yes, this is a business, right? And my father smoked 3.5 packs of cigarettes a day for 20 plus years. And the tobacco companies seemingly didn't care. But for whatever reason, they've woken up. They have produced and are starting to produce these new products. And I think that's what we should be embracing, is that where we are today. And, part of the reason why I'm doing this, and Brent, we've talked about this before, is, I think we all have a personal story as to why we want this to succeed, why we want, the WHO to really understand the science. Is, for me, obviously, it's my father who had a triple bypass at age 42. And I was 18 years old at the time, and I thought 42 was really old. I mean, obviously now I don't think 42 is old at all. But, to have a triple bypass at age 42, the guy smoked 3.5 packs a day. And, I just wish that these products were available in the 70s and the 60s. And I wouldn't, have the story to tell you. But, that time is gone. The time is now. And there's so many ways that we can help people, and people want help. Do you really think people want to stand outside in the cold and smoke one cigarette after another? No, they want options. They want an off-ramp to this. And if you talk to anyone that has switched, they will tell you that they feel better about themselves. They feel healthier because these products are less harmful. And all we're asking is for the WHO, a taxpayer-funded organization. You mentioned they have the power. They also have the tax dollars, and they should be doing what taxpayers and consumers want them to do, and that is to embrace these new products.
So just like 4 or 5 days ago, not very long ago, on X, the WHO Director General posted this, and he says, aggressive marketing of e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches is fueling a new wave of addiction among young people. This is not harm reduction. It's profit-driven tactics by companies seeking to keep our kids addicted to nicotine. The WHO has released a new position paper on tobacco control and harm reduction. We call on all countries to regulate every nicotine product as strictly as tobacco, including newer products like e-cigarettes, and to expand access to cessation support. And let me bring this one other bit up, because if you go to the WHO's position on this, and I think quite revealing, is that they mention that the industry claims these products pose lower health risks than conventional cigarettes and can be a part of a, quote, harm reduction, close quote, approach to tobacco control. These products frequently include electronic cigarettes, e-cigarettes, nicotine pouches, heated tobacco, smokeless tobacco products. The key thing is that they say that genuine harm reduction programs see health actors and agencies pursuing health objectives by implementing evidence-based strategies and interventions that are tightly controlled and monitored. Basically, only public health is allowed to do tobacco harm reduction, if they would do it at all.
Yeah, and that was that tweet that he sent coincided with the media presentation he did, where he mentioned e-cigarettes during that media presentation. And he actually said there is the vaping and e-cigarettes are presented as safer alternatives, but he said there's no evidence of a net public health benefit. I mean, that's quite simply untrue. We know that these things are far less harmful, and he said that they should be regulated at least as harshly as tobacco, not the same. They say maybe they can go further, and this is what we're talking about at this COP. We're going to talk about forward-looking measures, which are going to apply to everything. It's going to apply to tobacco, combustible tobacco, and it's going to apply to safer nicotine products as well, which is absurd. So, as I said earlier, we're having conversations that need to be had, and those conversations are not going to be had up the road. So, it's going to be good, this conference, and we're going to get some conversations about these products, which don't rely on sophistry and spin.
Now, I mean, it sounds like what we've heard from day one, starting to cover this issue back in 2015. People like Linda Bald and so forth would tell us that, why is this happening? Why is public health reacting this way? And one of the key reasons was because they didn't invent this solution. And it almost feels like we're right back to that as a primary thing. If public health had invented this solution, then they would have embraced it.
Well, and let me just say that regulation is about control. It's not about freedom. The more you regulate, the more you control somebody. And every bureaucracy in this world is about enhancing regulation and enhancing control. We are about freedom, the freedom to choose. everyone has a different way that they're going to approach this. And what the World Health Organization is saying, no, you have to follow our way or no way at all. And again, Brent, this is about freedom. Everyone's going to figure out their best way, whether it's a pouch, an e-cigarette, vaping, heat not burn. So that's what we're promoting. You know, if you look at the overall picture here, we're promoting freedom and consumer choice.
So, Martin, give us a minute or so here just on the experts and what we can expect from that. And we're going to then go into our first interview for today.
Well, yeah, as David alluded to earlier, it's my fault, mea culpa, I miscounted. We got 23 countries, not 22. So that's good. And we had 24 experts last time. We've got 39 now, I think. So it's going to be bigger and better than before. We've got some fantastic conversations, especially on this Monday. We've got a conversation with Tiki Pang. We've got a conversation about the USA and whether it's right to leave the WHO. We've got one on the EU. And I think we've got one on Article 2.1 and the forward-looking measures. So it's a real data-packed Monday that we're going to be enjoying today. So I hope people enjoy it from watching from wherever they are.
That's excellent. David, do you got a last word here before we jump into our interviews?
This is just the beginning. And I'm really excited for this week for the experts. We have Asia Day on Wednesday, which we can talk about later. We have a panel completely in Spanish. So really, this is going to be about people talking and people sharing ideas. And I love the debate today about the World Health Organization, because some believe that the World Health Organization should exist. Some believe it shouldn't exist. And I think it's a very healthy debate to have here in Geneva.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we'll be talking to you again in a couple of minutes. So we're going to jump in actually to an interview that I did with you earlier for an episode of RegWatch that we released just a few days ago. So let's have a listen. So looking at the WHO, the FCTC documents that they've released in advance of COP11, one of the things that they're saying is that the treaty should be treated as a floor, not a ceiling. So they're basically saying they're putting out there that there could be a way around the regular delegate process. What do you think of that?
It's typical of government is that you have mission creep, and you also have an attempt to silence voices, right? I mean, listen, this was supposed to be a gathering of delegates to talk about these problems, potential solutions. And now that we have the solutions that the WHO doesn't like, they're pulling back from how public and how inclusive they're going to be. That is dangerous. First of all, it's dangerous because it's taxpayer funded. I mean, people around the world, taxpayers from around the world are funding the World Health Organization, this meeting, and that's why it needs to be 100% transparent. There is not going to be any sort of counter media in these meetings. There will be no difficult questions. There will be softball questions coming from the media to the WHO, and that is not productive. That is not productive at all if we really are trying to solve this problem. And again, let's get at the heart of this, Brent, is that we are trying to solve a problem here. And that is cigarette use. And that is people dying from smoking cigarettes. And we have alternatives. The WHO refuses to listen to those alternatives, whether it's from us, from other consumers, from scientists, from the media. So it's frustrating to see that they are could be limiting, even more people from the process.
What goes through your mind when you hear the WHO describe tobacco harm reduction as an industry plot?
It's ridiculous to think that this is an industry plot, because you talk to these small vape shops, you talk to medium-sized vape shops, you talk to these folks that are working their tails off to get people to switch. And these aren't big corporate industry folks. These are mom and pop vape shops in this country. And, we work with this woman, Skip Murray from Minnesota. Her son had a vape shop and it closed. And these are people, I have never been a part of an issue where people have been more passionate about. I mean, the passion that comes from the people is really incredible, and I love it. I mean, it's good to see they have this passion, that they're willing to travel to Geneva for a week. But again, this is not about industry. This is about people. And okay, let's say a company makes money off of this. Who cares? Is it helping people? Is it making people healthier? Guess what? Elon Musk is making a lot of money off of Tesla, but are electric vehicles good for the environment? No carbon, less carbon footprint? Absolutely. So you can't just say, well, a company's making money, so it's bad. No, absolutely not. This is helping people. These products are helping people.
All right, thanks for waiting. I'm fixing a graphic there, so I think we've got it going. So joining me now is Kurt Yo, and he's our first Good Cop 2.0 interview. He's the co-founder of Vaping Saved My Life, VSML, which is a consumer advocacy movement in South Africa. Kurt, we talked to you many times. It's great to see you again.
Good morning, Brent. It's good to see you again too, sir.
So let's do some background first. You were a 20-year smoker before managing to quit with vapes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I smoked for about 20 years, and at the heart of my smoking habit, it was 40 cigarettes a day. I've lost both my parents and my grandfathers and many family members and friends from smoking. And it was when I discovered vaping that suddenly that aha moment clicked that we have a solution here. And in 2017, I decided to co-found a consumer movement with a fellow former cigarette or cigar smoker and now vapor, and just asking fellow vapors who were smokers to share their stories on our platforms. And that's how it started.
Oh, that's excellent. And how's it been going? Because I know that it's not been the easiest of routes to go in South Africa.
It's been very interesting and a lot of the times quite frustrating. And I said earlier to David Williams this morning is that I'm very glad to be here, but I still don't understand why I'm here, because it's such a common sense, logical thing to quit smoking. Well, that was their whole objective. That was the mission, to reduce the harms of smoking. And we found it in numerous innovations, and yet we are still here fighting for it. So in South Africa, we had our bill introduced to us, our tobacco bill. I'm not going to give the whole name here because we've only got a limited time. But that was introduced in 2018, and it's now before our Portfolio Committee of Health in South Africa. So very little has actually changed from a regulation and legislation, but the noise is definitely getting louder amongst the twos or the fours and against tobacco harm reduction, particularly in South Africa.
Now, we heard a lot, during COVID about misinformation around COVID. We've heard a lot about misinformation around some political, groups and so forth, and not just the US, but lots of places. But nobody seems to talk about the misinformation around nicotine and harm reduction. Why is that?
I think because a lot to do with how nicotine has been associated with tobacco. And I think a lot of the groups around the world, in particular the World Health Organization, have done a fantastic job of demonizing tobacco, and rightly so, because for every 1 in 2 long-term users, those people die from using tobacco. So that whole association of nicotine and tobacco has been well established. So it's very difficult to walk that back or to try to separate nicotine from this discussion. And yes, there is a lot of misinformation, and particularly in the developing world. I still find it hard to believe that we try to demyth the popcorn lung scenario, and that happens pretty much on a weekly basis in South Africa. So yes, it's an uphill battle, but eventually it will reach that tipping point where the general public just totally doesn't agree, or at least doesn't trust what the message means. And that's a very dangerous scenario when you start mistrusting or distrusting the world leaders in public health. then we got ourselves in a very, very dangerous position.
So that is the question, isn't it? Does the WHO play a role in the misinformation around tobacco harm reduction?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. I mean, we just heard from you talking about how these products should be regulated in the same way as tobacco. It's absolutely nonsense. Talking about how these products have been designed to attract kids, and that more and more kids are using these products. And I guess that, like we saw in the United States, that 2018, 2019, there was this massive peak, but they don't talk about how that has now dropped by more than 70% over this period of time. In South Africa, we had a recent study that looked at kids using vaping products, and it was established that it was just under 17% of the kids in high school were using these products. But what they don't tell you is that, for example, that survey was conducted on high-income schools. And that's not representative of what the average kid in South Africa is consuming. The average kid in South Africa is probably consuming combustible tobacco because of our illicit trade. But we don't have that information, and we're not sharing that information. And in fact, we're not even sharing that disparity that's existing. They're using the kids as weapons around this. The reality is that we do agree that kids should be protected from all nicotine products, but we can't ignore the massive amount of damage still being done by combustible tobacco around the world. We're still having 8 to 8.5 million people die annually from using combustible or traditional tobacco. And we still have over 1 billion people using these products. But yet the focus has moved away from that. That's no longer the mission. The mission is now to demonize nicotine and the safer options of consuming nicotine.
Oh, that's crazy. Well, I think you put it very well, though, Kurt. Thank you very much. And hopefully you have a good time at COP 2.0 over this week.
Thank you very much, Brent.
Let me understand this right. The Tobacco Control, the global treaty organization, has more items to deal with safer nicotine products than tobacco products.
It's about all it's spoken about. It's about all the WHO and FCTC has spoken about in the last couple of years, at least, maybe more. It's constantly. I mean, the World No Tobacco Day regularly now just talks about quitting using safer nicotine products. It doesn't talk about smoking anymore. It talks about quitting vaping, and it talks about flavors, and it talks about youth use and everything else. And this is this pivot that they've had, where they've pivoted from saying smoke free to nicotine free, and it's you can see it happening in real time. When COVID was coming across the Atlantic to the UK or wherever, when COVID was coming all over the world, basically, they spent their time tweeting about vaping and why you should give it up, and saying that e-liquid is flammable and burns your skin and things like that. I mean, what possibly could show you more that they're so interested in stopping these devices that they're actually more focused on doing that than actually tackling a global pandemic?
So taking a look at some of the advanced documents the WHO has made public with regard to the COP11, it seems that they're trying to elevate nicotine addiction above the actual harms of tobacco. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. You've got agenda item 4.5, where they're basically saying harm reduction is a trick. It's a tobacco industry talking point. It's nothing. I mean, we've got harm reduction in policy areas right through from transport to drugs to everything. So harm reduction is a thing, but they're trying to say, oh no, harm reduction doesn't exist. It's just the tobacco industry talking about that, which is utter nonsense. It clearly is. So when they talk about Article 4.5, they're trying to say, oh, harm reduction is, it's not part of the treaty because Article 5.2 says that we need to protect against the harms of tobacco smoke, tobacco use, and nicotine addiction. But by attacking just nicotine addiction, what they're effectively saying, we're going to discount the fact that vaping and other harm reduction products can actually achieve the Article 5.2 goals of reducing harm from tobacco use and tobacco smoke, because they take people away from tobacco use and tobacco smoke. But what they're saying is because we just don't like harm reduction, we don't like industry, we're going to say that nicotine addiction is the most important thing. Nicotine addiction doesn't kill anyone. The harms of tobacco smoke does, but the WHO is more interested in nicotine addiction than it is in the harms of tobacco smoke. And that says everything you want to know about the WHO at the moment, sadly.
Now, in the original ratified treaty, does it state nicotine addiction as something specifically it's supposed to address?
It does, but you've got to think when it was written. It was written it started getting written in the late 90s, and they finally formulated a plan in 2003, and it was adopted and went into force in 2005. Now, by then, there weren't really any safer nicotine products around. So their harm reduction was about something completely different. But now they've been kind of like ambushed a little bit. These products have come around, and now they want to ignore the fact that these products are a nicotine addiction which isn't smoking. You know, they want to conflate smoking with nicotine addiction. And that might have been true 25 years ago, but now we have different products and we have a completely different reality, we have a completely different world. But you've got the WHO stuck in the past, stuck in the late 90s, and just incapable of even contemplating that something has changed and just digging their heels in. And they're digging their heels in so badly it will harm public health in the long run. In fact, they're already doing it. People are dying because of what they're doing. But the sad thing is they don't seem to care.
Joining us next, live from Geneva, is Jeannie Cameron. She's the founder and managing director of JCIC International, a UK-based consulting firm, and is widely known as an expert on the FCTC treaty. Jeannie, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you, Brent, as well.
So please tell our audience about your work advising on all aspects of the FCTC treaty and protocol.
Well, I suppose I sort of look at it in a historical context in that I'm back in Geneva. I first came down to Geneva to work on what was then the FCTC. It wasn't even known. And I remember going to the job interview because I had a background in treaty work and not remembering the letters around the right way because it hadn't even started. So it was all very, very new. But I think, so my experience starts back in those days when, you know, the governments were first coming together in the INBs, as they were called, intergovernmental negotiating bodies, to consider the chair's text, which was the first draft of the FCTC, where they all came together. And that there were 6 of those that went on. And then when the treaty was finished, it then went on to what we now know as the COPs of the Conference of the Parties that created the treaty. So it's, my background here goes back a long way. And I was just, as Martin was, or others were speaking earlier, I reminisced of a time when, in fact, the public gallery was always open to the to those that weren't governments. And on one occasion, there wasn't enough room inside the WHO as well, because they had some delegations coming for something else. So the WHO actually opened up the WHO offices here in Geneva and made a big room with a big screen so the industry and everyone else could watch what was going on directly from the room. And I remember when we went into the WHO at that time, the actual headquarters of the WHO, there weren't too many of us, probably about 10 of us from industry and other backgrounds. But it was, to me, it was a really sad place. It was like there was, I suppose what it reminds me of is the Wizard of Oz. It was like you sort of expected this big, magnificent place with all these people working on public health. And in fact, what was there was, just room after room after room, because we did go exploring. There was no one really there, just empty desks and papers everywhere that, hadn't been looked at for years. And I just thought, oh God, you wouldn't really want to work here, would you? So we think it's this big place with all these people working. I actually think it's probably not that, because that was back in before 2010, so it was quite a while ago. So,
Jeannie, just to make sure we get this, is what's your assessment regarding the WHO's handling of safer nicotine products today?
Well, I think once again, look back to the treaty, the context, and having sat through it, the context of nicotine in the treaty, it's only mentioned 3 times, and it was negotiated in there in the context. It's one of the later articles, Article 22, I think, which was in the context of the developing world helping the developed world helping the developing nations with scientific and other evidence to help nicotine dependence. It was like setting up places that people could go to understand about, addiction to nicotine on the basis of smoking at the time. It was nothing to do with what's being talked about today, which I find quite extraordinary. And I think when we really do have to go back to the treaty, and you look at the preamble. A preamble of a treaty is there to interpret the object and purpose of a treaty. And if you look through the 23 points in the preamble, none of them cover nicotine. They all relate very specifically, every single one of them, to cigarettes. It says cigarettes throughout, it says smoking throughout, and it says tobacco. Tobacco. There is nothing there about anything else, and it's clearly about the protection from exposure to tobacco smoke throughout when it brings up the human rights aspects. So I think the WHO and those that have the same draconian views are trying to find things in that treaty to hang hooks on, and it's not right. And legally, it isn't right, because should this treaty, and not that I'm suspecting that it would, because there's no political motivation to do it, but if a government actually, governments went back to look at this treaty, it is very, and that's what preambles are used in any courts that do look at treaties. The object and purpose is clearly different from where it is at now and where it's being driven to.
So they've put out forward-looking statements for COP11 that pretty much are calling for bans on safer nicotine products. How are they going to achieve that?
Well, I think they've got, I'd like to hope they think they have quite a hard and uphill battle to do that. I think at COP10 we saw a number of countries led by St. Kitts and Nevis who spoke very strongly about the need to look at harm reduction and to look at, that how safer nicotine products are in fact bringing the smoking rate down. For the WHO to ignore that is really going the wrong way. So I'm hoping that COP11 will bring far more countries and stronger countries to come out and say and use the evidence of what is actually happening in their countries in terms of actual scientific evidence and data on the reduction of smoking due to safer nicotine products. And if they start saying that and they start putting forward proposals that seek to have that looked at, then I think we'll be in a positive position. COP7 was really interesting in the decisions document there. It actually says something like, if people can switch to essentially e-cigarettes with speed and haste, then we can see a reduction in smoking, etc. I sort of feel sad that there's not a lot of legal people on these delegations for governments. It's just health people who, and they don't really look at these hooks and things, because that could have been really significantly used to really bring this area into far more prominence than it is at the moment. But I'm really hopeful that COP11, and I think I'm really hopeful it will be a turning point for the science and evidence to really show through, and that governments do bring that up as a credible part of the policies that have worked in their national governments.
Well, I hope as much as you do, Jeannie. Thank you so much today, and enjoy your week in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Brent.
So, for those unfamiliar with your background, tell us about your role at the World Health Organization and what you observed inside its research and policy operations.
I was part of the World Health Organization following the appointment of the Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland in 1998. And she had a vision about WHO playing a central role in the use of scientific evidence for health policy formulation. So she established a new division within WHO called Evidence and Information for Policy. So my job during my 13 years with the organization was to really work with our member countries to sort of say, hey, when you want to develop and implement a particular health policy, the first thing you should look at is what is the evidence. For example, that a particular new drug is safe and that it actually works. So that was sort of the raison d'etre for the existence of that division. And that's actually what brought me into the orbit of tobacco harm reduction, because about 5 or 6 years ago, and before that, I was totally disconnected from this whole area of activity. But a colleague of mine brought to my attention the fact that despite the very strong scientific evidence that tobacco harm reduction could be a very important tool in helping to end the smoking epidemic globally, it wasn't being used and adopted by many, many countries. And that's what triggered my interest. Why is it that in spite of all the evidence, such an important public health intervention was not being adopted? I would say around, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, when vaping became a little bit more mainstream, became a little bit more popular, and sort of uptake of users around the world, that's when the WHO came out with a strongly anti-THR position. And, that has in fact become more strong in the last few years. So it has been in parallel with the rise in popularity of electronic cigarettes, of heated tobacco products, and more recently of the nicotine pouches. So it's fairly recent that it has been a particular point of contention between the WHO position and those of us who want to see a more inclusive, let's say, discussion and a more, let's say, risk proportionate position of the WHO.
And for our last interview here for day one of Good Cop 2.0, we're joined by Carissa During. Carissa is the director of Considerate Pouchers Sweden, a consumer advocacy group dedicated to promoting a smoke-free world and consumers' rights to alternative products. Carissa, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So first off, what brought you to the issue of tobacco harm reduction and safer nicotine products?
It is kind of a concept that comes really naturally when you live in Sweden. It is something that is very integrated with our culture. And I used to travel a lot as a young student, which meant that I got to see how students in other countries were living. And I found out that a lot of people smoke, and they smoke a lot, and it's not something that I see in Sweden at all. So that's when it became evident that Sweden has something that is very, very special and unique, and that the rest of the world also should follow. So when I got the opportunity to work with this, I said, yes, let's go for it. This is super important. Smoking is the leading cause of preventable disease in the world, and that's something we really should do something about. And since we have a solution to it, we also need to use that solution.
Now, most of our viewers know about the great work done in Sweden to eradicate smoking. Tell us about that.
Well, what's really interesting is that we've had snus for a very long time. So a lot of males have been using snus for decades, more or less, which has led to men having a lot lower smoking rates. And then in about 2016, nicotine pouches were introduced to the market. And also women started to switch from smoking to using nicotine pouches. And today, that means that we have landed on a smoking rate at 5.4% in the whole population. And we even have a smoke-free generation. My generation, aged 16 to 29, only have 2.3% daily smokers, which is incredible and quite unprecedented. And that's because we chose to switch the cigarettes to the nicotine pouches and the snus instead.
So what impact do you think the WHO has had on, say, Europe's approach to regulating safer nicotine products?
It has a huge, huge impact. I mean, the EU in general is not intent to follow in Sweden's footsteps, and the WHO is very important, and the WHO has a lot of influence in Europe, and Europe in its turn have a lot of influence on Sweden. Even so, they can ban nicotine pouches in Sweden as well, which would be detrimental to our success. So what happens within the WHO is really important for the future of safer nicotine products in Sweden and in Europe. And the WHO also kind of sets the standard for what kind of narrative we have around safer nicotine products. That's one of the main information sources. And if that is not accurately portraying how safe these alternatives are in comparison to smoking, then that information will not get out there. So that is very, very unfortunate and something that we really have to change. And I hope that this week will bring a lot of light on that.
Now, the EU is kind of known for being hostile to safer nicotine products, and they, just about a month or two ago, was trying to push a forward-looking document that was really calling for the ban of these products across the EU. But the EU backed down recently on this call for bans, and partly to do with Sweden kind of standing up. Tell us about that.
Yes, it's really quite remarkable. The development with nicotine pouches and snus in Sweden has been very consumer-based, and was not originally something that the politicians were really promoting. But now in the last 2 years, there have been a big shift in Sweden, and the politicians are really catching on, which means that they are to a larger extent defending nicotine pouches in the European Union and internationally in general. And I think this is a really important turning point, because Sweden, we have one of the best examples in the world. So our politicians need to be out there fighting for our model and telling the rest of the world that this works. This is something that the rest should do. And in particular, European Union, I mean, the average smoking rate in the EU is 18%. They're not even close to what we have in Sweden, and the rest of the EU is falling behind.
Unbelievable. Well, let's hope that everybody listens to Sweden. So, Carissa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So we're back for a couple of last words as they're sitting down. So I was told that we had to have the episode here wrapped up pretty quick because you guys got to get started. So do tell.
Yeah, so again, this is the first day of Good Cop 2.0. Really excited about what's happening this week. And I love listening to those interviews that you just did with Kurt, Jeannie, and Carissa. I mean, this really sets it all off. I mean, Kurt started with, his personal story, and then obviously the Sweden story. I think it's something that the WHO and more people need to hear about what's happened in Sweden, what's happening with the amount of smoking that has just really plummeted. And I mean, listen, Sweden is smoke free, right? I mean, let's call for what it is. And we need to learn from that. The WHO needs to learn from that.
Absolutely. Martin?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to this conference. We've got room filling up, ready for people to eager for the conversations we're going to have, and we've got a great lineup. So we're really looking forward to it, and I'm excited about what we're going to be seeing at this conference.
Well, that's great, guys. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much, and that is it for this special edition of RegWatch Live. Before you head off, please hit subscribe down below on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on X. For RegulatorWatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.